In developing countries, the life expectancy is lower. That is true.
Yeah.
But it is improving overall, although in some countries it's higher than others. That's true. They have a lot of natural disasters in many countries. We don't, and we're just lucky we don't have those natural disasters. I'm sure we agree on open borders. As long as you're coming into work, come on in. But you're not going to like people and stuff out of the welfare state, because we get enough bills. So if people could migrate out of these difficult areas, then they could prosper better because there'd be more resources and opportunities for them to work. But some countries are just basket cases. They have droughts in Africa that go on for 4 years, and it's not their fault. It's just the way it is. But thankfully, we have one country with this free enterprise and competition, so we're spinning off new technologies. And those massive new technologies generate benefits for the whole world, like drought-tolerant crops, new medicines. So they win from our progress, too. And also, Davy Crockett said, I'm going to Texas, you can go to hell, when treaties were broken with the indigenous peoples, the American Indians. So that's what a lawyer's for. We need lawyers, forensic anthropology, and genealogists to figure out if people had land that was appropriated, it's returned. There's a lot of work to do for lawyers, but you have to prove you were using the land first. Just fight them in best you can. We have more questions. Ooh, ooh. Should we go on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go on to at least 4. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make 2 points. The first one, I'm not sure exactly where this is from, but there's a saying that says, in all labor there's profit. So the question is, does that profit from this labor stay with the laborer? Or does this profit, is it separable? Is this profit able to go to somewhere else away from the laborer? The second point I wanted to make was, Professor Hicks mentioned Maslow's triangle, or the hierarchy of needs, and, so at the top is self-actualization, and Maslow says that at the bottom you start out with fulfilling physical needs, and you kind of work your way up to self-actualization, going through, social security and self-esteem and various things like that. But I just wanted to present the idea of an upside-down triangle where you start out self-actualized, and imagine a world where it goes the other way, where you start out self-actualized and you create your self-esteem from that, and then you continue, and eventually you create a physical reality that starts from self-actualization. So I just wanted to present that idea.
I've always thought that physical constraints motivate you to discover what you're good at. Poverty has a job to do. It's to give you an incentive to stop being poor. And you work harder. You can always just put it off for another day. If someone else is supporting you, you may never actualize yourself. There's a certain incentive effect to having to work for yourself.
I have a little saying at the bottom of this.
I've had my hand up for a while.
I put a little bottom of the saying here. Capitalism not only worsens the human situation globally, increases poverty and social inequalities, but it also reduces and distorts fundamental concepts like humanity, liberty, rationality, and goodness. I think one of the things that we're seeing here is this what it is to be valued, right? I mean, we talked about like what major it is, and so clearly in philosophy we'll say that you have an instrumental value to education for you, right? That you choose the major which you're going to get something out of at the end, and so the right major for you is going to be the one which is going to increase whatever it is that you're trying to get. And where I'm going to disagree with you is, once again, it's not that just instrumental value. There's an inherent value to some of this type of stuff.
It may have a psychic value. In other words, it gives you utility. But whether it has commercial, trade, exchange value, that's determined by both parties, so that voluntary exchange, not just yourself.
Right, but I mean, we're going to have to, I think, pick this up in the fall. But that type of value, the important value to all human beings. See, a society should be one, a good society, a just society, a successful society, call it whatever you want, right? A successful society is going to be one where it serves all of the people and maximizes freedom for all the people, right? Now, we're going to, of course, debate on what that means as far as, what liberty means, etc. But the value itself has to also be the type of liberty that we want, right? Philosophy, sociology, 18th century feminist basket weaving, whatever, right? So I'd like to hear from some students, though.
Good afternoon. I do have some thoughts on capitalism. I was wondering if the business professor was still here, because I had a couple things to say about that.
No, he left, I think.
Well, it doesn't matter. He once said that it was wrong and it was kind of a bureaucratic crook for people to take away your property and give it to the masses that were not as well off as you are, or because they need to pay the rent, or they need to pay the food, or they have bills to take care of. And he says that that is a perversion of the law. Now, I do agree in the sense that Marxism and its ideals have, in a sense, inspired communism, and communism is bad. But who's to say that capitalism isn't going down the same road of corruption? If you looked at that robbery and you think of it as a robbery, who put those people in such a bad place in the first place? It is because they're in a disadvantaged side of capitalism. It is because the system in which we have capitalism puts people in the lower class, in the less privileged class. So what right and what moral right and what actual valid reason do you have to feel like you're being robbed if capitalism and the system you've operated in to gain that wealth has robbed wealth from these people in the first place? Another point I'd like to make, in which I believe Professor Brown says that poverty does nothing but motivate people to do better. Well, there have been some studies that show that most people who are born in their social classes, such as middle class, lower middle class, and working class, stay within those classes throughout their lifetime. They stay in there. There's a very slight chance that they'll move up into upper middle class or upper class or the 1%. That whole dream of you can do whatever you want if you just try hard enough is false for most people, put at a disadvantage.
I think that's true, and unfortunately, only the wealthiest can afford to pay property taxes for schools and then pay additional amounts for excellent private schools. 82% of U.S. schools may be labeled failing. This is from a U.S. Department of Ed report in 2011. So I think a lot of poverty is because we can't escape bad schools, bad government schools.
One of the reasons that 82% of the schools are failing, you might agree with me on this, is because of the restrictions the federal government, the Department of Education is placing on these schools. We have these things like you have to have this kind of output, this type of outcome. You have to satisfy these kinds of exams because that's going to prove to us that you're actually doing anything. The accountability that the Department of Education, the federal bureaucratic nonsense that is putting out on these schools is what's helping them to fail, because you know what? They're not teaching anymore. They're not teaching. They're wasting money. They're spending money. And all they're trying to do is teach to a test so what? They can get more money. They're not teaching. That's the problem.
So that was a really good point. It's not just that you're choosing leisure, the schools are substandard and you have no opportunity for competing schools or taking your tax money and going to a better school. You're locked in, basically. You can't use your own money for the best
said
schools.
that law was perverted, with the Marxism. Who's to say that law isn't perverted to begin with in this country and in this society? That's the question I want to ask.
There's a lot of corruption, that's true. Yes, it's called crony capitalism. It's not a real free market, that's true.
But if we need to increase our education to better ourselves, then why are you stripping us of all our budget?
I'm giving your money back so you can spend it wherever you want on the best schools, not just the government
So
schools.
what are all these budget cuts that are happening in our JC that we can't then go to school to further ourselves and better ourselves? If you're saying that's
Education's
the only way
expensive for
out,
many
why are you
reasons.
taking that money from us?
Education's expensive for many reasons. We could use our education
if we're gonna steal from people to pay for other people's education, we can at least do it efficiently.
I'm not asking
And
about stealing.
I'm just saying we could use the money to offer more classes if we actually promoted the best teachers instead of having seniority rules where you have teachers who are not really great continuing, and we can't promote the best part-timers. And so we could use the money more efficiently. All right.
And also,
I mean, education, it could take another hour. It's like
and
an
also you
important
said how there were third world countries that are having these natural disasters and everything like that. It's a terrible thing. How do you feel about Katrina? Because that was on our states.
The corruption was amazing. People got money to get to go on trips, to get cars.
I asked about
Went up to Hawaii. It was incredible. So much waste. You really think government charity is more efficient than private charity at the local level where we can see where it goes and we control it? Really? I mean, private charity seems wrong, but is government charity better?
Excuse me, you were gonna. Hey. I have a couple of points. There's so much been said, but one of the things that I'm sorry, I don't know your
Politics.
Pam. One of the things that I felt that you commented on. I mean, I do believe that the market system is a perfect system. As far as far as highest valued use being distributed for monetary purposes, it's extremely efficient. However, right. However, then you commented about a moral judgment that Paul was making about how that wealth that exists should be distributed. But I found it a little bit contradictory because you also had made some moral valuation judgments about what should be done with finances. And so you're not speaking from a purely, you talked about charity and you talked about pollution. We know that historically, the markets have done nothing. Where did pollution come from in the first place? People operating within the market system, not having any moral value imposed on it. So you are imposing some level of what you feel there should be a moral value. They're just different than the ones that Paul is stating. My other comment is there have been significant amount of studies lately, particularly about when you remove people from that economic system, that they make, when you remove money from the choices that people make, they make different choices that are more about equally distributing wealth. So they've done a lot of studies on campuses where if you're standing there and they're giving away candy, have you heard about these studies?
Yeah.
They're selling candy for a penny a piece. People will buy more than if you're giving them away for free because there's a consciousness that everybody should be allowed to have them. So how do you account for the fact that as soon as you take money out of the equation, people instinctively, in their souls, function in a more in a more societally focused actions? That as soon as you remove the dollar factor, we are, as human beings, we care more about each other than we realize, but our minds are corrupted by financial greed.
anything soon enough.
Well, Larry Krikorian's bike was stolen out of his office, so somebody